All right, good morning, everyone, and happy Veterans Day. I apologize that I was not able to join you in person this morning, but I had other commitments in Topeka that I needed to be at instead. I want to take a few minutes just to talk about the history of Veterans Day and a little bit about what it means to me. I probably said some of these things, same things last year for those of you that were there for that, but I still think it's important to discuss each year around this time. So, little history. 1921, an American soldier who was unknown was buried in Arlington Cemetery. At the same time, other countries, England and France, had similar ceremonies where they buried unknown soldiers in their nation's highest places of honor, done on November 11th in recognition of the end of World War I, which we all know was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and later became known as Armistice Day. It officially received that name in 1926 through a congressional resolution, and then it wasn't until 12 years later that it was made a national holiday by congressional action. At the time, the war of all wars, or the war to end all wars, had we not had World War II and other subsequent issues, that day still might be called Armistice Day, but it was changed, of course, later to be called Veterans Day. And that wasn't done for a few decades. The first time that term, or coining it Veterans Day, was used was not until 1947, and that was thanks to a celebration in Birmingham, Alabama by Raymond Weeks, who was a World War II veteran, who organized a National Veterans Day and some different festivities. And then U.S. Representative Edward Rees of Kansas is the one that proposed a bill that changed it to being called Veterans Day in 1954. That was later signed by President Eisenhower. Interesting fact I did not realize until I was reading this today is that so 1954 they started calling it Veterans Day based on that presidential proclamation, but then in 1968, for some reason, a commemoration of Veterans Day was moved to the fourth Monday in October. And it became apparent that November 11th had a pretty high level of significance based on World War I, that, to Americans at least, that it was then moved in 1978 back to November 11th. So there was like a 10-year period back then. Full disclosure, that was right before I was born, that it wasn't on November 11th. But since 1978, Congress returned it to that date, and it's stayed there since. Some other facts, as I was reading through some things specific to World War I, we had 4.8 million people served from the U.S. in uniform in World War I, and then a whole lot of other folks helped support that war effort back then that weren't necessarily in the military. To put that into perspective, the U.S. population at the time was about 105 million people, so about 5% of the entire population served in World War I in uniform. An even higher percent, I think it's closer to 10% of the U.S. population was involved in some way, shape, or form. And then it increased drastically for World War II several years later. There was over 16 million service members at that time. So quite the uptick in people participating in the military. And then, of course, that's gone down over time as our military has gotten smaller, to be honest, since then. And then, this is probably more of a Memorial Day topic, but if you look at the number of casualties of war from the military specifically, we had about 320 people died in World War I, a little bit more than that in World War II, about 400,000. And then it gets smaller as the technology changes and the style of warfare changed. Vietnam War was around 60,000 deaths, 36,000 in the Korean War, and then smaller for more frequent fighting. Another interesting fact, since 1775, if you want to look at the total number of veterans or people that served in the military, 1775 through basically 2000, there was over 42 million service members for the U.S. And if you look at the total number of folks that have been killed in action, it's about 1.2. So I just thought it's important to recognize, some of those major events that have happened in our history and how things have changed over time. I think we all have our own reasons for why we joined the military and wanted to serve. Mine wasn't so much patriotic at the time. Later became more so. But for me, it was as simple as my uncle and both of my grandfathers were in the military. An uncle and one of the grandfathers was in the Navy. The other grandfather served in World War II in the Army. And to be honest, my grandpas are both gone now. They passed away a while ago. But the one that served in World War II, he barely ever talked about it. And I'm sure that's, based on some of the awful things that he experienced. He was basically, he carried a tripod for a machine gun. His buddy, would carry the machine gun, and they'd set up and, do their thing. And it was just strange to me, I guess, as a kid that never really heard him talk about it. The other grandfather was in the Navy and an uncle. And when I was in I want to say third or fourth grade in Kansas, I got an invitation to go on a Tiger cruise with him on an aircraft carrier in Norfolk. And, amazing thing as however old I was, 10, 12, at that age, to go out to sea and see a aircraft or a air show going above head. So that had an impact on me. Thought that was really cool. And then went through high school and college and was going the engineering path. And my mom convinced me to go talk to the Navy recruiter at a K-State career fair. So went and did that, and that recruiter convinced me to take an engineering path into the Navy, and kind of the rest is history. I served 6 years and then left and joined Westar at the time, and then, which is now Abergee. So for me, it was something cool that would help my resume. Had family members that were in the military, and certainly appreciated their contributions, and thought, I can learn some things, see some cool parts of the world, contribute to society, and quite honestly, help build a pretty good resume item there. And it was true. There's things that I was able to see that the vast majority of people never have been able to experience in their lifetimes. And same thing with those of you in the room that have served. But since then, it's meant more to me from a more patriotic aspect as I've gotten older and matured, and just I've been able to recognize the contributions that people have actually gone through and learned about, so many folks sacrificing so much, not only to serve, but those that have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in battle. It's just amazing how many folks have done that in the history of our country. And I take a lot of pride knowing that I got to help be a part of that, albeit to a small extent. But anyways, I don't want to dwell too much on that. Looking at my phone here, I'm already at almost 9 minutes, so I'll wrap it up. Just wanted to say thank you again. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Hopefully the breakfast is good. I'm bummed that I'm missing out on that, but I'm sure it's great. And with that, I will see you next year.